Hello everyone who is watching us now and about to join us later. I would like to welcome you all to a heading of the most interesting people within us. My name is Natala Malishava and I'm representing a training center Nosce. And I have a great honor today to present our very special guest, Raymond O'Brien from England. Raymond is about to share the series of his near-death experience with us today. But before that, I have to share that he has been resuscitated by humans 9 times and 1 time by his own cat. He also is the only one person in whole United Kingdom who has acquired the knowledge of psychotherapy after his near-death experience. Hello, Raymond. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being our guest today. I know you are very busy after you start practicing psychotherapy, and still you find the time to be with us today.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. So hello to everyone. I hope you're all well today. Hello, Tamo. Thank you for asking me, and thank you, Natia, for asking me and helping us.
It's our honor. I'd love to ask you to take us to the most exciting journey today, to take us all to the other world. So let's start. I want you to start telling us your story. So what has happened?
Well, my story goes back 10 years now, and it is still as clear today as it was 10 years ago. My mother was very special in my life, and she said to me, "You have to change, Raymond, because if you don't change, something is going to happen to you." And I knew that something was going to happen, but I didn't know what, Natia. And I was driving home from work in the middle of the week, and I had a vision or a voice that told me that you're going to die, Raymond. And as soon as I got...
Sorry to interrupting. Was it a voice or was it a vision or both together? How would you...
Very good question. The visions were coming for quite a long time about how I had to change. And the voice was very similar to the voice you may get when you go to church. So I knew it was a very special voice. And I knew by not listening there was going to be a price to pay. I could feel that. My mother could feel that. So when I got home, I rang my mother and I told her about what the voice had said to me that day. And she said, "Who told you this?" And I said, "The voice told me." And she said, "Nothing else, Natia." And I know that you knew my mum very well. You are my sister.
Yes.
And that was the end of the conversation. Sunday night came, so that was 3 days later. I went to bed and had very bad chest pains, very bad chest pains. I got out of bed, did some exercises, the pain went away. I got back into bed, pain came back, and I couldn't breathe. So I sat at the edge of my bed, and I couldn't breathe. And a voice, my own voice, my soul, said, "You're in trouble, Raymond." And I stood up. I still couldn't breathe. And when you can't breathe, Natia, when you start to suffocate, your body does unusual movements. And I remember standing next to my bed and being in shock at the way my body was moving. I'd never seen nothing like it before. I went downstairs.
So you were still be able to control your body at the moment?
I could just get downstairs. I came downstairs, turned the light on, and there was my cat. It was called Bill. And I remember as I turned the light on, sorry?
The savior.
He was my savior. I saved his life 2 years before. He was attacked by a dog and I beat the dog off. And I said to Bill, "You owe me one." So I came down the stairs here, turned the light on, and there was Bill curled up on my sofa. And he looked at me and he had the look of, "You're in trouble." And I could hear myself say to him, I know I'm in trouble, Bill. And I walked towards to get the telephone. And it was a cordless telephone, Natia. And here in the UK, if you hit 3 9s, you'll get through to the emergency services.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't manage, I could only hit 2 9s. And then I ran out of oxygen. And I collapsed on the carpet. The next thing I knew was there was a smell and a rasp on my nose. I opened my eyes. Sorry?
Bring in your bag.
He was bringing me back, and it was Bill. I opened my eyes, and it was the cat's face looking at me. And I hit the last 9. Spoke to the operator, and I sat with Bill on the chair until I could hear the ambulance coming. It was about 11:45 at night.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was quiet. I'm talking to the operator. She said, "The ambulance is coming." I sat with Bill and we could hear the siren off in the distance. And then they came in through the door, the paramedics. They took me out to the ambulance and they said, "What's wrong with you, Raymond?" And I said, "I can't breathe." They put that thing on the end of my finger to measure my oxygen levels. And I remember them saying to me, "You have to breathe, Raymond. You have to breathe." And I couldn't. They said, "Your oxygen levels in your body is at 26%. She turned her back to me when I was in the ambulance. And it was at that moment, Natia, when I thought to myself, if ever there was a time to check out of this life, it's now. I put this chin onto that shoulder and I was on the other side.
Good.
I was tiny. I think it was my soul. Well, I know it was my soul. But maybe in part 2, we can cover much more of that. But in part 1 here, I will give you the basic outlines.
Please.
I'm on the other side. No clothes, tiny, a different being. And the
Different
wind.
being. Different being.
A completely different being. The wind came to meet me. And it went through my body. And it was the most beautiful, warmest sensation that I've ever had. And I stood there, and off in the distance was 2 men and 3 women. The 3 women were dressed in white with head robes on, and the 2 men were facing the 2 women. One of the 2 men was an old man with a big beard and a beautiful brown tanned book. And I waited. I remember thinking to myself, where do I go to get my wings? That's just the thing that came to my mind. One of the women turned and looked at me, and she smiled at me, while the other 2 women were still listening to what the 2 men had to say. The woman turned back and spoke to the other 2 women, and they've looked back to me, and I'm still standing there. I heard one of the women say to one of the men, "Raymond is here." The next thing, Natia, I was by the side, I floated to the side of the old man who was reading this tan-coloured book. And I heard him say, "He's not supposed to be here." He did that. And the next thing I know, I've woken up in the back of the ambulance. And the paramedic, her name was Rebecca, she looked down at me and I looked up at her and she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I was on the other side there." She said,
How long apparently you were out? How long it take?
Approximately 2 minutes. I
2 minutes.
was on the other side because it wasn't expecting me to have a cardiac arrest. So we had to get the resuscitation machine, set it up, wait for it to charge, and then they shot me back to life. So I'm propped up on my elbow and I'm looking up at the paramedic, and she said, "Do you go on the other side a lot, Ray?" And I said, "Yes. I come from a family of seers where we see illnesses on people." I said, "If you park your ambulance, come into my house and I'll make you a cup of tea and I'll tell you all about it." And she shook her head. She went, "No, Ray." She said, "We're still outside your house. You died. Your eyes are in the back of your head." She said, "We can't move until we had resuscitated you." So I remember thinking, they're wrong, that they've got this wrong. But I won't say anything, I'll just go along with it. So we took off to the hospital. We got to the accident and emergency room. I remember the doors opening, bang. I heard them give my age. I was 47 at the time. We got into the accident and emergency room, and everything changed. Everything just changed. I knew I was dying. I knew that. I haven't got time here again. In part 2, I'll explain to you in depth of how it touched me, how it affected me, to know that you're dying. It was unexpected.
What you can compare the feelings that you had at that time to?
It was like being on the end of the world. I felt so alone, cold, very frightened. Knowing that I couldn't go anywhere. There's nothing that I could do about it. And to accept that was a real shock to me. It shocked me. And then I died. And I kept on dying.
Second time already in a hospital, yes?
Yeah. The rest of the resuscitations all took place over a period of the rest of the hour. So it started at 12 o'clock and then finished at roughly 1:15. That's when I sort of knew. But I remember maybe about the 4th or 5th resuscitation. Some I don't remember. Others I remember very well. I remember my nose being on the ceiling tiles, gasping for breath and falling backwards back into my body. I remember sitting on my forehead. My soul sat on my forehead, and I could feel how cold I was through the soles of my feet. And I watched one of the crash team turn around and say to all the other staff, "If this doesn't bring him back, nothing will." And he did this. And then I remember looking at him, my soul, saying, "He doesn't know that this is going to hurt me." He resuscitated me again. I came back, died again. I came back. I came up like a horror movie, from lying flat on the gurney to being upright within seconds and pointing fingers at people. I remember the staff recoiling. I remember collapsing back down and dying again. So all of this kept on going. I remember being asked by one of the cardiac team, "We need your next of kin's telephone number, Ray." And I thought, oh. I said, "Am I that bad?" She said, "Yeah, you are." And I remember looking at the clock, and I remember saying to them, "Don't ring my mum unless I do die. Don't come back." I said, "Because my mum isn't very well, that it would only upset her." So they said, "Okay." So when all of the cardiac arrests had finished, I knew it had finished, Natia. I felt so peaceful. And I turned and looked at one of the crash team, and I smiled at her. And she said, "It's good to see that smile." And I knew it was over. And after that, this is where all of the problems really began for me. People don't
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
People getting help. I found help was very difficult to get. Nobody understood what it is like to die and to come back so many times. So I felt different. My family came to see me the next morning while I was in hospital. And the nurse said, "Your family's here, Ray." And I remember thinking, I know what the word family means, but I don't know that I have a family. And they all stood at the bottom of my bed, my sister, my brother, his wife, my mum, and I didn't recognize them. But I didn't want to hurt them, so I pretended that I knew them. And that was something which doesn't leave us survivors. Many of us come back with the very same symptoms.
So what you're saying now is that after having near-death experience, everyone who is coming back, they've changing. Like you,
in one way or another. Yeah.
So
Whether
what changed about you, Ray? How was the Ray after having this experience changed in compared to the person who was before this accident?
That's a really good question. I can only tell you what somebody who knew me very well, which is my mother. My mother was my teacher, as most good mothers are. She said, you were a very vicious man, she said to me. And I knew I was. And I knew that what had happened to me was justifiable. I knew that. But because when you have a cardiac arrest and you suffer the oxygen loss, it affects the brain an awful lot. And the consultants say it takes us up to 4 years for the brain to settle back down. So in 4 years, I didn't know who I was, Natia. I didn't recognize the house that I'm in now. I lost my occupation. I was a mechanical heating and plumbing engineer. I worked for myself. My memory was affected. My spiritual outlook was affected. I was affected on a paranormal level, which disturbed me. I could see illnesses more than I ever had. I had to go to cardiac rehab after the event. And while I was in cardiac rehab, one of the cardiac sisters said to me, "Now you can't do your work anymore. What are you going to do for a living?" And I said, "I come from a family of seers."
Yes, can you talk about that a little bit more? You mentioned that you're coming from a family of seers and you see the illnesses. Is there any specificity in illnesses that you see?
The most that I've been seeing recently, if the soul allowed me to see. So if we used you as an example, I couldn't just sit next to you and go, it doesn't work like that. You have to show me, and I like that. So the cardiac sister said to me, "What do you mean you see illness?" I said, "Well, I see cancers and I see tumors and things like that." So she asked me whether she had cancer, and I was really shocked when she asked me that question. So I asked her time and time again, "Are you sure you want to know?" She said, "Yes, I want to know." So when people ask me that, Natia, I go into a very gentle, altered state. I can hear you talk to me and I can talk back to you, but I know that I'm seeing. So I told her to turn around. So she's now got her back to me. And I'll never forget, she had a blue uniform on with a white stripe on it. And I watched this finger come up and it touched her just below her left shoulder blade. I said, "You have cancer, it's here. And it's a millimeter in size, but it's asleep." She turned around, Natia, and she looked at me. And I thought she was going to tell me off. First thing she said to me was, for your information, Raymond, it's not a millimetre in size, it's 1.2 millimetres. And where your finger was where she said that she had a tumour on the back wall of her lung, and it was 70 millimetres in diameter. The surgeon could only go in through the back here, and he had told her that he has to leave this piece in, and that's the piece that I had seen. So she said, do you want to work on the cancer unit here as a volunteer? I said, I would love to. And this is how I spent a year and a half on the cancer unit, and the effect that I had on people who didn't have long to live was, I can't put it into words. It was the most beautiful experience when they would come and it happened to me. So we have a patient upstairs who's hysterical. We can't give them the drugs. We've told them about you, Ray. Can we bring her down to see you? I had a little room on the cancer unit where I would see the patients. Yeah. So they brought her down to see me. She fell asleep in my room, which meant they could give her the treatment. She only lived about another 3 or 4 days after. But it gave her time to say goodbye. And that was when I started to realise about my worth of who the new Raymond was. I was still very confused. So what had happened, without me knowing, I'd become famous in this hospital. I didn't know, but people would come up to me and say, you're really famous here. I'm only trying to help people. Would you like to give a talk to some of the big bosses from the National Health Service and tell them how it has affected you? So I did. I gave a talk. At the end of the talk, there was a paramedic in the audience who said, I don't know if you're interested, but there's a charity who have advertised that they want to train people to become psychotherapists. He said, and I thought about you because you said you couldn't get any help, which was true. So that's how I started to train as a psychotherapist.
And I know that now you are very busy. You already have a client, you're already consulting. Tell us a little bit more about it. It's of your life that you've been sent back for.
Yes, I referred to my mum. I sat at the kitchen table and she asked me, she said, why do you think you have been brought back here? I don't know. She said sternly, you are back here to help people. And do you know what, Natia? I didn't like to hear that. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. I wanted to work with horses because I could see illnesses on horses and inflammation. I was already working on animals, and working on people was second, you know. So I accepted the offer. I went to work with the charity. I'm waiting on my results. All the studying is finished now. I'm just topping up with my placement hours. The charity that I work for select clients who have experienced either near death or complicated trauma. I have worked with terrorist victims. I've worked with people who have spent months in comas. I have worked with people who have been unconscious in Denver, and I visited them through seeing. And I've explained to the family, I'd send emails to the family to let them know that their father would still survive. And it was the only way, the reason why I do that is for the medical profession, they want proof. Everything is based on proof. So the only way for me to do that now is if I go and visit somebody through seeing, I'll send myself an email so I can then back it up. If when people go, I don't believe you. So here I am with this charity, been given the privilege to work with others, and the impact that I seem to be having on the survivors just tells me that my mum was right. This is what I should be doing. And now we're talking about me going to the States, working with veterans. Many veterans, they tell me 50% of veterans come back with a near-death experience. And because I'm one of the first here in the UK to specialise in the trauma and complications and the recovery from near-death stroke cardiac arrest, it's a perfect environment for me to get to other people rather than just sit in a room and see one person at a time. I want to do big meetings, group meetings, so I can start teaching those who haven't got that experience that I have got. So that's sort of where I'm at with it at the moment, and it's moving very quickly.
Yes, I can see that. And when are you planning to travel to US?
Well, the first talk is booked in for next September, September the 9th in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. I have a TV program for the BBC next year to do. I did one last year. And also I've been contacted by another group with the possibility of helping people who haven't got long to live, the terminally ill. I didn't see this, but other people, when they hear about me or speak to me, they see other purposes for me. And one of these purposes is back to America, or wherever in the world, to impart my knowledge, just to give people the peace of mind. I didn't see the value of that. I'm a very humble man. I underestimate the value of what I can give to somebody who is close to death. And it's only now that my brain has settled down from the cardiac arrest. I locked myself away for 5 years, as you know, isolated myself from all of my family because I couldn't cope with seeing illnesses, helping people. It was all too much. And the only way that I could cope was to be alone with my cat, with the cat who saved my life, until it's brought me to this point now. So it's a magical journey. It's just such a magical journey.
It is, definitely. And before we finish, and I said introduce each other to another meeting, part 2. So I'm leaving as a secret for those who are watching us now. The second part of race experience we will plan maybe in a month's time to share with the audience.
Wonderful.
But before that, maybe just very briefly, you can. I've heard from you this, but I want you to share with those who are watching us now. How would you describe this world and the other that you've seen already?
I would like
Where are we living?
I would like to use the words, I went back to hospital a second time because I had heart trouble again. And I was in hospital. And do you remember the story of the man who was reading the book, the brown book on the other side?
Yeah, from the first
time. I was in St George's Hospital, London, right in the heart of London, and they couldn't find a bed for me, so I had to wait. And eventually a nurse came up to me and said, "We found a bed for you." It was a little unit with 4 beds in it. 3 of the beds were occupied and the last bed was for me. I went and sat on it, and the bed opposite me, the curtains were closed, but I could hear 2 voices. I heard this man say to another man, "Yes, I am a very spiritual man, Father." And then the curtains opened up, out walked a priest from behind the curtains and left the unit. And Natia, there in that bed, was the man who I'd seen on the other side with a brown tan book, which I later spent 9 days with this man, which he'd write all his poetry in. And he was a seer also, and he knew people that I knew. So he was 84 years old. He'd been in the Second World War. He'd been at D-Day. And after the fourth or fifth day, he called me over and we started talking. And he asked me, did I know if he was going to die? And I couldn't answer him because I knew he was going to die. It upset me a lot. And as I stood by his bed, he held my hand and he said, Raymond, promise me you won't stay here. Promise me you'll become an international person and you'll help people. Because this here, Ray, don't come back here because this is the hell. And that is how I see it here. And I say that a lot. Many don't agree, but because I've been on the other side and I know what it's like on the other side, I call the other side home. And I would go now. Yes, I would go now. I would go with no regrets. I have no fear of death. The only fear that I have is of the pain of dying. That's the only thing that frightens me. So this is my hell. Here on earth is my hell. There are beautiful things that I can do, which keep my spirits up. I love helping people.
Which you're doing already?
Yes, yes. So I'm kind of doing what has been asked of me. And you know, in part 2 or part 3, because there are enough parts.
Of course.
There's so many layers.
If you will find the time for us.
Of course I will. How could I not? How could I not? It's been a real privilege to sit here, and it's been an honour to be asked by you and your sister.
Thank you so much for having the time for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And maybe for a very last moment, would you like to wish those who are watching us now something for a Christmas? Kind wishes from you.
Oh, I would love to do that. That's beautiful. Oh, I want to wish everybody a beautiful, peaceful Christmas with the best of health. Love the ones you're with. Treat each day as if it's your last day. Just have a beautiful time. And come back to us here and listen for what else is coming, because it's worth listening to, and I think it's very helpful for others who are out there. So yeah, have a great new year, and obviously come back and see us again. It's just beautiful.
Thank you so much. And I would like to wish you all a very happy Christmas with the joy, health, wealth, and success. And same to you, my darling. Thank you so much for having time. And we shall see each other maybe in 1 month's time.
We will. I look forward to that. That'll be beautiful.
That will be.
Bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.